Hi, I'm Blake, and this is my writings about podcasts. So yes, I finally did it. After numerous people asking me to write a book about association podcasting, I did. It's geared towards mission-based organizations. In it, you'll learn how to set goals, record, strategize, and maintain a successful podcast for your organization. I base it off our 3-step process that Human Factor uses to launch shows. It goes step by step on all the things you need to think about to see if a show's right for your organization. It's got almost no technobabble, and it's full of little tips we've picked up over the years to help your organization tell its story. So check it out at all major book distributors. And for more free information about podcasting, flash briefings, or to pick up your copy of Association Podcasting, go to humanfactor.net.
Yeah. Mega Man, Jimmy Easy. Come on, let's go. It's okay. Make it out this place someday. We'll fly away. Tell the haters to get out our way. You just gotta believe it.
Welcome to Advocacy Help Desk, where advocacy comes to learn, laugh, and make advocacy fun. Here are your hosts, Brian Fratkin and Andy Pope.
All right, welcome back to the show. We got another episode, a hot episode today. Advocacy Help Desk is a... There we go.
There it is.
Is
Help
a...
Desk.
Exactly. It's a network of experts and also industry professionals who have been doing this for a long, long time, who have banded together to help people who are having challenges and issues with advocacy, on all things advocacy. And so we're building out, hopefully, a robust library to help people kind of navigate, get better at their game. Our ultimate goal is whatever you're advocating on and whoever you're advocating on behalf, that you can do it better for them. I think we all have important missions. I myself work for the footwear industry and advocate on behalf of basically everybody.
Big shoe.
Big shoe, that's right.
Shoe.
And I'm constantly learning from our guests that come in.
Right.
And from Brian and Blake about how they're doing things or best practices. And so we wanted to digitize it and spread it out. I don't think people should have to pay a lot of money to get educated, get knowledge, get tips and best practices, whether that's luncheons, whether that's big events that are for profit. We're no profit. It's not non.
Think about that.
We would want it, but
Right.
we're no profit. I mean, ultimately, we're not here to make money. We're here to help people be better at what they do. So, of course, we have Brian Fratkin in studio, who's actually been in advocacy longer than me at this
14,
point.
15, something like that.
14 years, huh?
Yeah, no, don't. Yeah. Not what I love.
years.
No, it's look, what I love about what we're doing here is that we've got what I like to say is we've got the puzzle pieces, right?
Right.
What the puzzle looks like is up to each association, right? They know their people, they know their membership, they know the people they're trying to advocate on behalf of and for and whatnot. So they know what that puzzle looks like. But this is the kind of stuff that just works across the board, right? We're giving folks with the Advocacy Help Desk both answering questions, but then in these little short skirts, it's in these short skits.
Short skirts?
Short skits, short skits. Excuse me. In these short skits, what we give them though is sort of some of those building blocks that they can use to put together when the time is right.
Blake, I think Brian's been practicing because his game is on point today. That example is...
Yeesh.
I think that's a clip that we're going to use for explaining Advocacy Help Desk.
There you go.
It's better than the video I cut.
Absolutely.
From my office.
Let's start
and then of course we have Blake who generously allows us to come in here and banter a bit about advocacy. And is doing some really innovative stuff,
right.
Both with podcasting and FDRA. We use him for our I wouldn't trust it with anyone else.
And a bunch of folks that we know use them.
Bunch of people use Blake and Paula and their organization around podcasting because it is difficult. I mean, you can definitely sit down on your laptop and hit a record button.
Right.
But then the issue becomes editing and quality. And then it's like, how do you post it out to it? Because everybody listens to podcasts on different channels. I mean, it could be iTunes, could be, it could be Spotify. You could listen to it online, just on a website. But it's a growing number because more and more people are listening to these podcasts. And to sit there and have to do all that work isn't really worth it.
Well, and I went to a conference earlier this year that did, what were some of your mistakes over the last year? And one of them was, hey, we wanted to launch just a simple video or a simple podcast, and we thought we could do it ourselves.
Right.
And so we wanted to copy, and there was this video of one of the presidential candidates just walking and answering questions, right? And so they did the same thing with their CEO, and it didn't look bad,
right?
But it absolutely could have been done so much better. And they admitted to it. They said, look, our problem was we didn't have a closed environment. We didn't get the right sound. We didn't get the right shots. And so it worked and it was okay, but we know that we left some money on the table for our PAC and for our grassroots efforts because we didn't just invest that little bit extra now to make it pay off later.
Well, I would say having to structure things, like having to figure out your workflow on even creating that and then pushing it out, is actually taking away from your content. The content's the most important thing, I think, to podcast, right?
Yes.
I mean, and it's really difficult because you have to make, if you have an interview with a guest, you have to make them feel at ease. You have to pull out things. You have to keep the conversation flowing. There's enough work on that is your job to do and execute, because I think content is king on these things. But if you're having to do all the other things as well, it pulls away from all the important, it pulls away from the message and the ideas that you're trying to help push out to begin with. So what we're lucky to have is Blake on our team.
That's right.
Who actually, he's the man who wrote the book on podcasting.
I did.
Just came out.
Association podcast.
But I think people will be like, why is there a book? Right. And like, why, like, it can't be that hard. I mean, it's over 100 pages of information in this. So Blake,
it's that hard.
I believe it, but I mean, when you sit down with someone and they're like, "I want to do a podcast," where
First
do you
question,
start?
what's the goal?
Yep. Okay.
Yep. So, and I think I did this with you guys, as a matter of fact. Now I have to push buttons so that the camera switches get weird. That's because I'm talking.
Doesn't matter. We get it.
So I asked Matt, I believe. I said, if you guys had 7 listeners, would you guys be happy?
Right.
And they went, what?
Yeah.
And I said, but what if the listener was the president of Keen, Reebok, Nike, Adidas, pick your numbers. Would you continue to fund the show then? And you guys went,
You're right.
You stroked your beards and
I like that answer, Blake, because that's the question that I think everybody should ask and everything, right? When we start an advocacy effort with our client, our first questions, even a prospect, our first questions are, what's your goal and who's your audience, right? And I think that's a great one in terms of quality versus quantity, right? If I can tell you that the top 10 people or top 50 people here are listening, does that make up for not having 4,000 listeners here, right? So I like that question a lot. So how do you sort of get that answer out of people, Blake?
It's funny, pretty much by the look on their face a lot of times. So I had another organization say, no, the CEO is not who we're after. We're after more mid-level. Okay. So as an example, if you were going to use, let's just say a stores. Let's go with retail. And they said we want to reach managers of stores and teach them how to do what they do better.
Sure.
So yes, that's how we go in initially, and that's really gets the creative juices flowing. Then actually we try to make our bubba, as we call it. So we would say, who is the person? Male, female, age. I'm sure you do the same thing.
I love
right,
it.
Brian?
This is persona building. Yes, we talked about this before. It's okay if we have the 20% of people that we want out of, the 80-20 rule, right? If we have these 20% of people, what do they look like, right? As a persona, as a sort of their characteristics.
Let's build a LinkedIn profile.
That's a great way to put it. Let's build a LinkedIn profile for what the person is we want to be listening, or in our case, advocating or donating to the PAC or contributing or whatever it is. What is that person? What are their qualities?
Then the next thing would be usually is workload. So, all right.
What does that mean? You lost me.
What is the vision? What is your vision as of right now, and where do you want to take it? So do we want to do one a year, one a month, one a week, one a day? Where are we going with all this? And I find that's where, again, the conversation gets rolling a lot, because you'll have some people, as an example, want to set up a studio in their office, just record, send us the files and mix, or just publish them up.
Sure.
Then you'll have other people that say, like Andy, and there's a lot of interesting things I find that come with going to a studio, and I don't care either way, because we make money either way. Right. But I find when people go to a studio, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Andy, it becomes an event and a day. And here's the unintended consequence that I always seem to find. It's if it's on a single day and you're not doing onesie-twosies, that's the day, right? And when you book somebody, we can do 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4. And unless it's like Richard Branson, like that's the day, we'll have you next month. And so it makes the scheduling process much easier. I know, and a lot of people don't believe me when I say that. But
so let's back up a step here. So we got the big whiteboard. I feel like we need to get a whiteboard, right? So we can start writing this stuff down, right? But it's okay. So who's the audience, right? What's the goal, right? And then let's start building personas.
Yep.
And then
What can we handle?
And then what's the workload? And so what you're saying is, and I think you're right, and I think you've experienced this, Andy, is if you, like anything else, right? If you're listening to a webinar or anything at the office, you're distracted, right?
Right.
So imagine trying to produce one from the office. It can be done by all means. I'm not saying it can't, but
We build studios for people, yeah.
But the flip side is going into the studio gets you in the right mindset
Right.
of doing that. So I know you guys do this.
Yep.
How do you guys get in that mindset? Like, what does that mean, sort of?
Well, I think first of all, as soon as you set a date that you're going to be in studio, then you have to.
Now the fire's lit.
Right, and then
true, yeah.
Right, and then you're like, okay, we've got this date coming up. We need guests.
Okay.
So who are we going to invite? And then at that point, we have conversations in our office of. Obviously, we're talking about footwear business trends on our podcast, Shoe-In, right? And so we're balancing retail versus supply chain versus consumer trends versus. So we want to balance because you don't want, unless you're doing a series, right? But you want to balance that out, and then you just start emailing people out,
right?
And you just say, hey, we're doing our next taping. We'd love to have you on, and you tell them the format and all those things, and then you start booking the times.
Yeah.
And then you come into the studio, and we try to do 6 tapings, and. You lock it in that way. It's because if you're going back and forth to Blake's thing, if you're doing 1 or 2, you're going back and forth. It's just wasted time in your day. But the thing is once you do 1 in the morning time and you hit your 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th,
then you're in the groove.
It's in a groove, and your conversation internally gets a lot better. Your interviews get a lot better, and you just get into a flow. And that 6 could turn to 8 because all of a sudden you're thinking, okay, we've got 6 guests, but we did this newsletter. It was a big hit. So let's talk about that newsletter. Let's talk about a new website we launched. Let's talk about something around our industry that has no relevance, but it's something that these conversations we want to put out.
So let me stop you on that one. So it's not just obviously about bringing out. So I think the next question, and this I know, Blake, that you've done a lot of studying on, is telling the story, right, of what you have to do. So it's not just finding the guests that fill into those blanks of what we want to talk about.
Yeah.
But it's also, it's not that hard to develop an episode, let's say, around something
people
that
think it is.
People, and that's what I'm trying to get at.
That's the biggest challenge.
Is tell me how.
What are we going to talk about?
Tell me how easy it is. But like, what you're saying is, let's take that newsletter that had a big open rate and a big hit with our folks, and let's just talk about that for 10 minutes.
Let's break it down,
and do a quick 10-minute quick hit, and put it out there.
That's a great point too, because we'll have a guest on that may be so dynamic we go 45 minutes. And Blake
he's making it a 2-part.
Hey! We have had to split it before because people just want to talk, and it's great, and you don't want to ruin the content or trim it down or whatever. Right. And then we have guests who are just like very succinct in answers, and we did one the other day with a well-known guy who follows the sneaker industry. And it was 20 minutes, but that 20 minutes was huge, high quality. And it was like the conversation's over. We don't need to go any further. So length is determined by what you're talking about and what your goal is and all that kind of stuff. But I think, I think the biggest challenge for people to know is like, there's a ton of stuff that you can cover and talk about. And where you start from is the conversations you have with your board members, with your advocates, because people, if you listen, are constantly telling you what their challenges are, what they're worried about, or what they want you to do. Right. And that's what you talk about because that's what they want to hear.
Yep.
And I think when we started our podcast, it was really because we were going to all the trade shows and we had all these really interesting meetings at headquarters, and we would find out really interesting things. And we do events just like everybody else does, but they're targeted events, and you have these canned questions and Q&As and all that kind of stuff, and you're it's focused on networking and the content's good, but there's something different about a free flow conversation where I know some people will script out what they want to talk about. I don't ever script it out.
Don't.
Because you never know where it's going to lead. But the reason why the podcast works so well for us is those conversations that we had on a trade floor at a headquarters, we would then say, this is an amazing conversation. Can you come on our podcast to talk about this?
Yes.
And then that becomes let's just talk about what we just talked about. Yeah. There's your script. We just had all these conversations. We're just going to redo it on air so that other people can hear what people are thinking about. And the amazing thing is everybody has a different opinion about something. You may be in the baker industry where you're making muffins.
Yeah.
They're a client.
And there you go. And there'll be 8 different ways you can make a muffin.
Sure.
and you should talk about 8 different ways you can make a
Right.
muffin. I mean, and that's an episode or 8 episodes.
I mean,
you know?
for you, as you mentioned before, breaking it out into the different sort of sections of of topics, let's say, right?
Right.
Is obviously the Footwear Association deals with a lot of things, tariffs and manufacturing
Right.
and all these great topics that target different audiences.
Right.
But if I'm in the footwear industry, I might be interested in any of them, right?
Well, that's the idea too. Is it's all about how you market what this is, right? It's like, you know, if you're in supply chains and you're a warehouse worker, you might be really interested in a topic we have about warehouse automation.
Doesn't mean you want
or
to
robot-
stay as a supply chain person.
That's
right?
true.
You may want to move.
But we also say to a lot of people, this is about your industry that you work in. You should know about all these different things. And one of the most interesting things we found out was when we were doing this, it was initially trying to digitize meetings to reach more people, right?
Yeah.
And then it morphed into a brand opportunity where people now see us a little bit differently, because when we would go to events, they would say, oh, there's the lobbyist guys. And we were seen as kind of like the
Sure.
DC insiders with suits or whatever. And,
Right.
and probably like very not approachable in some ways. And then they hear our voice, and it's amazing how you go to an event now anywhere around the world. They're like, oh, I listen to your podcast.
Right.
It's great. And they come up to you because they have heard your voice and they feel like I know you guys.
I love that about podcasts. And Blake, I want to ask you about sort of story development in a minute, but I love that about podcasts because I think the best thing about it is what we call just breaking down walls, right? Because
Right.
a lot of what all of us do, and we've done previous episodes on this, is authenticity and
Right.
storytelling, right? And so it's all about telling that story of what is the footwear industry, right?
Right.
Maybe this thing in manufacturing, affects the supply chain, affects retail, affects this. So how can we tie it all together? And a lot of what we say too is like breaking down the walls of the boardroom, right?
Right.
Because as you said, a lot of the associations out there, their membership sees them as something else, right?
Right.
And especially the government relations, advocacy, public affairs people, it's like, oh, you guys are just over there doing that thing, and not let us tell you a story. We're real people, right?
Right.
This is what we do. This is what we're passionate about. We're passionate about the industry. We're passionate about these
Right.
issues. Let us help break them down for you if you have questions. on
Right.
them.
And then that in turn gets people to start taking more actions because they feel like they know who you are. They understand better what you're doing for them. So your action levels when you make a request of grassroots to do something actually increases because you've built a rapport, whether you know it or not, with people who have heard your voice.
Right. Right.
And I think the biggest problem today is people, and there's nothing wrong with it, but we send a lot of newsletters. You can't understand or hear a person's voice in a newsletter.
Yeah.
You can't hear tone. You can't hear the passion. You can't hear the concern or like how important it is that they take action.
No, it
right?
could be
we could put it
very-
in big,
yeah.
bold words with red. It's like
matter.
take action.
Right.
But when I'm literally on a podcast, and we did one, we did a live one with Blake. We were testing it out. We had like 100
That
people
was so
on.
cool.
Yeah, we had and at the end, I literally was banging the table, be like, "You got to help take action.
Dwight
This is
Schrute over here. I
yeah,
love it.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's like this is your job at stake, right? We got to take action on this stuff." And it really came off, and people were like, "Thank you. Like that's what we needed to hear. Like we need a cheerleader." And you can't do that with bold letters saying take action.
No, and
it's
a lot
like,
of associations have had that problem for years of here's our story and our 3-page PDF of what it
Right.
means to
Your
do
deck?
footwear,
Yeah.
and our deck, and we talked to Jenna about this before of
Right.
like you have to go in and be malleable. You have to go in and realize that you may have your bullet points and you may have your deck, but like that's not necessarily what you're going to stick with, and that's okay because in the same way that she's talking about selling, we're doing the same thing. It's just we want to tell our story in a way that's approachable, and it's going to happen how it happens.
Right.
So
Blake, what's
Yeah.
next on this on the
so
list?
the
wanna do the
story
storytelling?
piece. Well, I want to say because I think that's a big part of this is like I think there's two pieces that we want to hit on. Is one is the process, right? You talk
Right.
about like when we're setting up the next taping, right? That's a big day because we've now
Right.
committed to it. What are the pieces that we want to put in place before we get to the story? What are the pieces that we want to make sure we check off? Not bullet points of what we need to talk about and here's the
Right,
exact,
right.
et cetera. But like, all right, let's talk about guests. Let's
Mm-hmm.
talk about, what other things are you thinking about on the process of setting up those days?
Here's what associations could do more of. And in the book, when I was researching the book, that's what they say to say in author school. When I was researching the book, researching the book, instead of saying in my book, they say to say in researching the book.
in researching the book.
Is I call it hub plus 2. So high stakes, unique circumstances, big characters, and then plus 2 is we'll come to that in a minute. So high stakes, and so
This is storytelling. then.
yes.
Okay.
So and I think people could do more of this, and you don't have to do it to what I'm about to say to the level, but high stakes is always death, and that's kind of can be tough in a lot of associations. Not so much in nonprofits, believe it or not, but then take it down to money. That's what associations are taught. It's always number 2. So we want that to be hitting high. Unique circumstance. That could be like the analogy I use is like Ozzy Osbourne. When I was researching the book, the analogy I used was Ozzy Osbourne. You don't typically see the full concert on television, but you do see the Osbournes, which was a hit show, because we've all seen Ozzy live and we all know what it's about. He's going to gargle blood and, breathe fire. But seeing his daughter slam the door in his face and him being treated like any other dad is unique. You don't see that.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And then big characters, obviously. It's kind of probably hard in association to get an Ozzy Osbourne, though we've had celebrities. But a big character can be Andy Polk when he's singing, or because he does on shows, or it could be an influencer. It could be. So where I'm going with this is that's the magic formula for your hit show, if you will. The problem is, like in weight loss, everyone knows how to do it: eat less and exercise, or eat better and exercise. It's hard to find. It's hard to do.
Hard to capture.
It's hard to capture and find those people.
I would also say this is why working with professionals matter, because if you're setting up all the processes and you're trying to do it yourself on your MacBook, you're thinking so much about processes. And if you get those down, okay, great. And then you're going to go to your interviews, right? Yeah. And there's things that you forget that Blake comes in studio and says, remember to do this.
Right.
Think about that. You missed this.
Yes.
This could be better.
Right.
So it's almost like a professional person coming in and saying, that was good, great job. Or it's like, that was real crap.
Right.
And you might think it was the best thing in the world. It's like,
we're a little more gentle than that.
Well, yeah, but I'm just saying, like, it matters that somebody is like, is this lined up? Is this set? How do you want this? How do you do this? Like, and then for us, it's like, we literally, we book the studio time.
Yeah.
We know what guests we want to have. We come in, we execute it, and then we leave.
Yeah.
And Blake's job and Paula's job is to make us sound good.
Yep.
To stitch it all together, to put it on our website that they run for us, and then to plug it into whatever channel people want. And then we don't have to worry about any of that stuff.
Right. Right.
You know?
Right.
And I think that's an important part too. It is difficult. Like, if you get the operations right, great. Yeah. But then is the content going to be good?
Piece it all together.
And then if maybe your content's great, but your operations is bad, and you're only up on iTunes.
Yeah.
It's like then you're missing out on
Google
half
Play.
the listeners in the world that want to. Well, I don't have an iPhone. I have an Android. I don't want to download. And it's like there's so many pitfalls that I just think when you do a podcast, there's so much stuff, and it's
everyone thinks it's just talking into a mic.
Right. The content's the hardest part to think through. Like who you want. You shouldn't have to worry about all the other stuff.
So we're talking about a single episode now, right? We've gone through, to hit the high notes again, we've gone through what's the goal, who's the audience, right? What kind of commitment do we want to make? Those are the 3 big ones. And I think you're right, Blake, in that as you start to talk through them, you can read people's faces and you can see, it's almost like flipping a coin. When you flip that coin, you know what you want it to end up as, right? So those are the big ones. Now we're talking about individual episodes. We've booked the time in the studio.
Right.
And now we're talking about the individual episode. So we're looking at the hub method.
All right, Pub plus 2. So the other 2 were. Give me the other 2 real quick. So the other 2, because we're running out of time, was the ticking clock.
Okay.
And ticking clock and like family values. And I don't mean Leave It to Beaver. So for some reason in America, people like the story of the family business. You guys know this, Andy.
Yep.
Like the team working together, the rags to riches. That's family values. Ticking clock's pretty simple. You guys have it all the time in your line of work, Andy. Trump's going to put new tariffs on in 4 days. Oh my God, we're all going to die.
Right.
And what are we going to do? So you combine all those things, and when you look at a guest or you look at an episode, that's what you kind of look at, like when you're trying to book this.
Right.
Now, that said,
and in layman's terms, I think a little bit from my perspective of what Blake's saying is, there's an issue that you're talking about. There's a problem.
Right.
There's a challenge, and you tee it up at the front. And it's like, today we're talking about intellectual property issues because we've seen a lot of brands not doing it right, and it could be the death of your brand if you don't trademark something correctly.
There's your
right?
high stakes and your time
high stakes,
sensitive.
exactly.
Yeah. And today we have on the expert from this person who has been helping people with this challenge. Right. And then it was interesting. We just did a podcast with someone starting a new podcast.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because we've been doing it for almost 3 years now. And to look at someone starting off had real difficulty just opening up the show. And Blake was so great. It was great.
You're talking about that guy at the thing.
That's right.
Yeah.
At at the trade show in Portland. And so Blake literally was just like, you got to line up what the problem is right off the bat, and then it will flow. Like, don't think about opening up in a clever way or being like a hilarious person, whatever. Just open it up with, you know what? Like, intellectual property is like the bedrock of your brand, and if you're not taking care of it, then someone is going to take care of it for you.
And HR 14 could screw us all, or whatever it is.
And then you say, okay, here's the person.
Right.
Look, and then you get them to tell their story.
That's right. You just talk to them and you just bring it out. And
you want them to be the real person too. Like, here's how I got into this. This is why I love this issue.
Yeah.
Let me tell you where I've seen problems and where the fixes are.
And we actually do shoe stories. That's one of our big things, is when somebody's been in the industry for 30 years, the most fascinating stuff is like, how did you end up here from there? How'd you get into it?
I love it.
So we call it shoe stories, like tell us your shoe story. And people love hearing it because
that's family values.
There's a reflection in it of themselves if they've been in the industry for a long time.
Right.
They're like, oh, I remember Dongguan in 79 when we first went in there. Like,
I was a wee kid, and Phil Knight was with me, and whatever it is.
So it's interesting in that way. So what else, Blake? What else is key?
Let's see. So there's that, and then there's we did the family values, we did that sort of thing, and then consistency.
Yeah.
So whatever you choose,
that.
whatever you choose to do, and then we'll wrap up. But whatever you choose to do, whether it's we're going to release our shows on the third Thursday of every month, we're going to release it coordinated with the websites. We're going to release it every week, every day, whatever it is. Try to stick to that, because the 11 p.m. news comes on at 11 p.m. for a reason.
Right.
You know,
people expect it.
And any show comes out on Monday, and you can see the big hit, on Monday when it comes out. And then, not that it drifts off during the week, but that's the day. That's the day
we
it comes
fought
out.
Blake on this too. I remember our first meeting, and Blake was like, it's got to come out every week. And I was like, we don't have enough for every
Everyone
week.
says that.
I was like,
says that.
Maybe one a month. And Blake's like, no, you need one every single week.
Yeah.
And it, to that point, it's not just about putting out something every week, but the consistency is the brand.
Yeah.
And that way you can say new episodes every single week.
New episodes
Something
every
fresh,
every
fresh.
first of
People are
every
looking
month.
forward to
Right.
it. I mean, and this is what I think this is what the footwear folks do better than a lot of folks, is breaking down those walls. And the podcast is part of that, because you've got your high stakes, you introduce your experts.
Right.
You've got these issues that are very esoteric to the rest of the world, like tariffs, I don't really understand, or where are my shoes made, or why is it being taxed or differently than a backpack or something like that. And there's a story to tell around all of that, and the podcast is one of the quickest and easiest ways to do it.
Yeah, and it's what's so great about it too is you have this content and it sits there and it's talking to people in the right format of today. People are reading less, they're writing less, they're talking more. They want to do podcasts. They want to access it when they want to access it. Like webinars are great, but sometimes they're so boring because they're so structured, and you could have this tone and fun on a podcast that you can't have other places. And it's just done, from my vantage point, it's done more than we thought it would.
Well, it's less garbage art too.
It's less garbage, but
meaning that people still listen to your first episode, right?
Right. Yeah. Of course.
As
There's
opposed
a
to a
catalog.
newsletter that's gone.
That's right. There's a catalog there, but it's actually, to your point, breaking down walls. But it's allowed us to grow and expand, because let's say we show up to we were just at a materials show where raw material suppliers come and show textiles and leathers and things like
You've
that.
lost me already, but I love it. Tell me
That's where you determine on
You
a
pick
shoe,
out your stuff for your
you pick
shoe.
out the stuff for the shoe.
Sure,
like
yeah.
It's actually pretty cool.
So we go there, and if we put up a banner that said FDRA, no one would bat an eye or look
This
at
is
it.
so true,
No idea
Right.
what they do. Don't care. We're sitting there like holding out, like, make sure you join the pack, or do this, or take action. And it's like, all right, thanks very much, but I got other things to do.
I got materials to buy.
But as soon as you sit there and you got microphones up and you got a branded banner that says shoe in, and it's got a microphone, it's like every week, subscribe. People will stop and like watch, because it's so out of the ordinary, and they're actually like, that's really interesting. So what do you guys do? Like, what is this? And we're like, we're the Footwear Industries Podcast.
And each one of those people
like,
coming up to you is a potential guest on the show.
guests on the show, but also
You've had fans come up.
we're
many
finding people that we can bring into our advocacy program in ways that we never thought possible, right? Because usually it's so hard to make an ask and keep people engaged and keep those open rates going. But if they know your voice and you send out emails and they know you're trying to work for them, they're likely to open it if they've met you.
You're
right?
authentic.
So,
You're a real person now.
Yeah.
They hear your voice weekly. They can hear your passion for it.
But we never thought that was going to happen.
No, of course
on the podcast. We had no idea what we were going to do with it. We had no idea what we were going to talk about. But we jumped in and we said, let's just try it and see what we got.
I love it.
And the thing is we left all the hard stuff to Blake. Make it sound good.
Thanks.
Yeah, well,
that's our job.
And give him the ability to get you through the process.
Right.
You know, to open you up so that you can do and just be the person you are. Right. That's the idea.
Yeah.
So there it is.
I think, it is. I think to Blake's point, and I'm glad he like stitched this out for people to like think about as they go through it, so they don't make mistakes. If they want to do it on their own, fine.
There's ways in that book on how to do it on your own.
Right.
There's a plug.
And that's perfectly fine. You may not have budget right now.
Yeah.
But as you
Proof
get
of
into it and
concept.
start seeing different things, I mean, and if you want to step up your game, I can't imagine anybody out there in association not understanding the benefits of a podcast.
Right.
To push back and say that's not for us is ridiculous, because and it's not just podcasts, but it's video, everything. It's like 80% of the internet now is there's no copy anymore. People want to engage, and they got to hear that emotion and that passion. And you can't just show up to an event. It's almost like the air cover for a ground assault at an event, right? If you're going to go in and like try to, push and get people involved, you got to have something that kind of tease it up a little bit for you. And
that's what podcast, video, VR, etc. But podcast makes it easy.
Yeah,
easier.
I love it.
Easier. And
I love it.
And then all of a sudden you start doing these things, and you got weekly content you're popping into your newsletter. So it's not just text; it's something a little bit different. We do a lot of text.
Yeah.
Because
everybody does.
It's a lot of technical stuff, and you got a lot of people who are technical out there in the world that want to read technical stuff. But for everybody else that's trying to make sense of it, that may have, and I've seen a lot of this, but more and more people are doing more and more jobs that they're not used to. And so somebody may have a real passion for one section of that, of their job category. And then the other part they got to know about,
Right.
but they don't want to go real technical. These things kind of help them pull them in a little bit better, and they listen to it passively. People are like, I downloaded it, I listen on the plane, I listen to the car going to work, like, if I'm break, I'll put it on, like, so people listen to it however, whenever. But I think people, the idea that you can say no to this, to me, in this day and age, is ridiculous. If you actually want to push your issues and grow your base, you've got to do something like this. You got to do a podcast.
Love it.
There you go.
Love it. I think
So
that's
go buy
great.
it. It's in Amazon.
Okay, what is this?
Humanfactor.net. Just go there.
Okay, Association Podcasting, and I guess if you type that into Amazon, it's going to pop up.
It will. Or the iTunes bookstore and all that stuff. But
And how much
Humanfactor's
is it? It's
all
like
the-
$6,
like $6 or
$7?
something. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Worth the money just to take a look and see how to do it, or schedule a meeting with Blake.
That's that.
I think just jump in, read
Right.
this stuff. Share this around to your office if you're looking at doing this. It can be done, and the benefits are bigger than what people think.
I think that's exactly right.
Great.
Where advocacy comes to learn.
There you go. You slip that in.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right.
Blake, anything else on podcasting?
We could do an hour. Let's do another show later.
Okay.
I love it. Let's
All
do
right.
it.
We'll
We
keep
could do an
going.
hour. All right. You gonna
All
do
right.
your end speech here?
Yeah, my end speech.
Go for it. I'm putting the camera on you.
All right. Hello. This has been another episode of Advocacy Help Desk. We're going to tag this into our resource library for folks to take a look at. It will always be there. So please, again, pass it around. But if you have questions or comments, if you have issues you're dealing with right now and you need help from an expert, we can take you and put you in contact with somebody in particular that it's an expert on that issue or on that challenge. So definitely go to advocacyhelpdesk.com and drop us a line on that. If you have ideas for guests, for topics you want us to discuss, again, drop us a line on advocacyhelpdesk.com. We're happy to do that. And until next time, I want to thank our partners at Spark Influence and Human Factor for putting on the show. Until next time, this is Andy Polk signing off for Brian and Blake. Until next time, have a great advocacy day.